Hello and welcome to this week's review of My Hero Academia. This week we're reviewing the episode titled History's Greatest Villain, and we kick off this review, as we always do with these reviews, by talking about the positives and the headline positives. All the big things I'll be discussing over the course of this review. I loved the rising stakes that we have here. The animation and design work is fantastic as ever, and I like the final plan they devised towards the end of the episode. Now, in the context of this episode, Tomura is history's greatest villain, though I'll be honest, after this week, Crunchyroll gives him a very close second, but more on that later on. So, with All For One being undone, now Tomura is in the driving seat for the future villain of this world. And the first thing he does, rather than updating his skincare regime, is to reveal his plans of what he wishes to do with Japan. Namely, decay it into the ocean, a process that he gleefully concludes would take about a week to achieve. Now, I do understand this is not the literal first thing he does in this episode. The first thing he does is being able to capture the danger sense quirk from Midoriya, which, well, that was a hell of a thing when it happened. I generally, for a moment, I did think that when we saw the giant hand coming into the little thought space realm thing, that this was a All For One echoing through. Like, the idea is, I suppose, that there might have been some vestige of All For One in Tomura somewhere, and I thought that this was the manifestation of it, or alternatively, that all the vestiges of the past heroes in One For All were going to get into some kind of fight with a kaiju All For One, but no, that's not what we got. Instead, we had one of the past users getting captured and taken away. But nonetheless, that's something we can discuss in greater detail later on. The grand focus, of course, is destruction on Tomura's part, with the main central focus going to be, and the thing that will debut his powers of destruction to the world, will be destroying, or partly destroying, Mount Fuji. Now, I will admit, when I first saw that coming up in the background, there was a part of me wondering if they were going to throw him into it. Like in the end of the big final fight, that in the end they just chuck him into it, or he passes out and falls into it, or Midoriya just like super punches him into it. Because I've played enough games to know that a great cure for regeneration powers is fire, and a volcano has a lot of fire in it. And I know that Tomura, in the end of the day, going out like a villain in a bad James Bond knockoff movie would be a bit much for this series, but hey, if it's good enough for Gollum, it's good enough for him. In all seriousness, though, the use of Mount Fuji as being the focus for this destruction is deliberate. It's not just being done for the sake of doing it, or just to give us a big thing to destroy. Mount Fuji is the definitive natural landmark that we associate most with Japan. There are others, but this is the one that when we think of Japan, this is one of the things we probably think of, at least when we're talking about geological landmarks. Now, I'll be honest with you, I can't comment on the more folklore or spiritual aspects as to what Mount Fuji represents, but I can say is that the destruction of it would, by association, be the destruction of Japan as a concept. Because even if he fails to destroy the nation at large, either physically or more socially, this landmark is a symbol of Japan. Or more appropriately, it's more like a metaphor for Japan itself, and to a certain degree Japanese society as depicted in this series. That it is this, whilst powerful thing, is something that is unchanging and unmoving, something that is without emotion or care for everything around it, because it is a dormant volcano, and that itself reflects to certain degrees on the society that it then has around it. That Japanese society, as depicted in this series, is one that does not care for people like Tomura. It does not care for them, and as such, that is what has allowed people like Tomura and the rest of the League of Villains to come to be. They do not fit into the beautiful picture postcard vision of what Japan is. They represent a darker side of it, but a darker side of it which, to some degree or another, it has created for itself. That these are individuals that have grown in the shadow of it, and now here they are to destroy it because they see it as being a symbol of a world that does not reflect them. And that even if, at the end of the day, Tomura does fail, destroying the mountain to some degree or another is creating a wound that will never heal, and would only end up inspiring new generations of villains who will try and continue on with Tomura's ends. And beyond that, it is simply the fact you're taking something that is static and still, something that is peaceful, something that is, to a degree, almost like a symbol of stability, and turn it into a symbol of chaos. You're taking this beautiful, amazing, awe-inspiring thing and turning it into this violent, nasty, destructive volcano, something that will christen in this new age that Tomura is wanting to create, whether he is alive to see or not. Again, this is creating a wound that might heal, that, oh yes, some of the superheroes might be able to come together and turn it back into a dormant thing, and they may be able to make it look like it used to look, but it's still going to create a wound that would never really heal. It's going to create a scar that will always be there, that will always be embedded within the psyche of Japan in this world. And as such, he would always then have an influence on this world. He would be a figure that would extend beyond just being a villain to a cautionary tale, to being this aspect of folklore, to be evolved, ironically, beyond being history's greatest villain, but to become something wholly different entirely. This perpetual, eternal, immortal symbol of chaos and destruction. Again, even if he then died immediately thereafter, like even if he fell into the volcano and died immediately thereafter it, he's always going to be known as the one to have done this. And additionally, ironically, and I might be using ironically incorrectly, All For One's big thing was, I'm going to be the Demon Lord, I'm going to be known as the Demon Lord, taking over the world and doing all this stuff, right? That was his big thing. But Tomura doing this, again, even if he died moments later, would metamorphosize what he is and what he represents, not just to Japan, but the wider world, to a degree that he would be the Demon Lord. Like, in the back of my mind, I was just thinking about this, I was imagining, like, he does this, even if the heroes win in the end, he does this, like, 100 years down the line, or 200 years down the line. He's become almost like this folklore monster, this creature, this entity. Like, you might even see variations of him appearing in pop culture, or in local folklore, that he's now been reinterpreted as some kind of dark god thing. And that is a horrifying idea, that even at the end of the day, he could become something even greater than this, even if he fails. And even just beyond the symbology of all of this, even beyond just what this could then do to this wider world, and even just within Japan in this world itself, it ends up showing that Tomura himself is focused on more than just being a destructive force. Because how he's been displayed and depicted up until this moment, certainly as regards to what his grand plans for all of this is concerned, he's always been depicted as I'm going to destroy the world, I'm going to tear it all down, and just ushering a new age of destruction and chaos. Bleh. But really here it shows us more to that he's being selective with his areas of destruction. Even if he's not targeting this as a symbol, he's targeting it because he knows it's going to create a level of destruction that is going to be almost impossible to deal with, and the heroes, what few remain, are going to having to decide how they tackle all of this. Oh sure, they could immediately just double or triple and quadruple their efforts to take him down. They may succeed, but then they're leaving the volcano to cause more destruction, not just for Japan, but the wider world, with all the smoke and the ash and whatnot going into the atmosphere. So it shows that he has something he's working towards, that he isn't just gonna, if when he defeats Midoriya, go on this tour of Japan just breaking it all up and sinking it into the sea, then going off into other places. It shows that there is more behind him, and he's seeing himself and how he does this more as a villain and more and less of just a purely chaotic, destructive force. Even just on a mechanical level, it gives the fight and gives this moment in the story a clear goal, with something very deliberate. We have to stop him doing this. We have to stop him destroying this thing, regardless of the symbology of it, regardless of the mechanics of it, regardless of the fact it's going to create a big fucking volcano. This is a thing that we're aiming towards, and this prevents the fight from descending into just Midoriya and Tomura duking it out until the end, until one of them falls over or one of them ascends to the next level. Then Midoriya has to go to a level beyond plus ultra, and he gives it something a lot more deliberate and a lot more focused to do. And that I appreciate that. I have had my issues in the past where it feels as though the action in this series is getting too fantastical for what we've had set up for it up until that moment. But at the very least, it's giving us something a lot more concrete of, we need to stop him doing X, and we're going to do Y to try and stop that. And what they're going to do to try and stop that is more than just, alright, Midoriya, you've got to do it. You've got to use the super secrets power that's been inside you all this time, and whoa, here he goes. You're not dealing with your regular Midoriya anymore. He's now the legendary Super Midoriya. No, we're not getting into that, and that is thankful. And all of this is, once again, well presented and well animated. I will admit that I think that the prior episodes did the action a lot better, and a lot more of the animation just a lot better for me. And here, that high quality of animation is more contained in the moments of action, which I understand, because in the grand scheme of things, this isn't really an action episode. This is an episode that really exists to allow the audience a moment to catch their breath, given everything that's happened over the past 5 episodes, and give us a moment to establish stuff and to set stuff up for whatever comes next for the rest of the season, how long or short that it may end up being. We may have another 6 episodes, another 5, who knows? Who really knows at this point? But regardless, this gives us an opportunity to just set things out and to reach into, I will be honest, quite a bit of exposition. Now, in fairness, whilst there is a lot of exposition in this episode, it is presented in a way which is decent, and with visuals that make it a lot more interesting, with many of them reaching into more abstract, strange and otherworldly setups. Not quite as creative, I think, as what we've seen in prior seasons, but it certainly is something that does make it a lot more interesting. Even though a lot of it is still just a bunch of characters stood in a room talking, it's at least presented in a way which is visually interesting, and I do appreciate the filter that they put over the memories of Star and Stripe when she's the giant skeleton thing, because that at least covers up just how naff the CGI was there, and it makes it look a lot better. And just how it's put together with that VHS almost looking effect to it, it makes it look like the memories are strained and hard fought and hard remembered. And I do enjoy all that stuff. I wish I knew more of what she was saying in this particular period where she was making her appearance, but more on that later on. We are at a moment in the story where the stakes are rising, quirks are being lost. Again, there was a moment during all of that where I thought it was All For One's hand reaching in to start pulling the past hero vestiges away, and we're going to get into some big, gratuitous, over-the-top CGI, not CGI, but certainly an All For One kaiju fight, and by the looks of things, we're going to have something similar to that, given the plan that has been devised here, but I will see how it's all presented, but I do like the way that it is going, at least on a narrative level, but we'll get on to that in just a moment. Like, the idea of giving Tomura All For One, One For All, is an idea that I thought about as a way they could possibly win it. Albeit the end result of it being very different to how they're going with it. Like, here it's being used as a mechanism ultimately to reach Tomura and to try and go from there. But I had other ideas for it. Like, there was an idea that I had like a couple of years ago of doing a video on how this series could end, and then just do like a few handful of different scenarios. And one of them was involving giving Tomura All For One, One For All. And with Tomura, if he got it, it would be the thing of him overusing it and exploding like the egg in the microwave, to give a call back to that. And if All For One got it, well, have you ever seen Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4? I imagine it would be like the ending of that, with the vestiges of all the quirks he's stolen over the years getting powered up, and, well, ending it like the end of Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4. And that's a different way they could have gone with it, but that's not where they're going with it. They're using it as a mechanism with which to open up Tomura to try and reach him, to reach the true side of him, to reach the lost, scared child that still exists within him, despite modern-day Tomura doing his best trying to suppress that part of him, to suppress that part of his personality. I know they are trying to present it as though they're two different personalities, they're both two different things. I don't like that kind of stuff, but at the very least, I get where they're going with this. And the whole idea of Midoriya having to give up his quirk to save the day, it feels apt narratively. It goes back to the whole you don't need a superpower to be a superhero aspect of it. Because in the end of the day, given how this is all setting up, The thing that isn't going to save the day isn't because Midoriya has all these powers, it's because he's able to be a hero on a different level. He's not a hero in the punch the other guy really hard in the face way, but in a he's going to reach this person as a human being. He's going to give up this power to try and reach Tomura to some degree or another and achieve some kind of victory. Oh sure, there's a superpower here being used to open that door, but at the end of the day, the thing that is going to save this world, given how this is put together, is going to be Izuku Midoriya reaching out to Tomura Shigaraki, or whatever his original name is, forgive me, I don't remember. But this is the way he's going to do it. He's going to reach out to them and to try and bring them back from the brink, or to try and find some way in reaching them as a human being, so at the very least, they get some kind of peaceful conclusion all of this. And that at the very least, this idea of him reaching this person as a human being, to reach out to Tomura in a way that no one ever did. Because we go back to previous episodes, we get in the My Villain Academia stuff where Tomura was wandering the streets after killing his family. There was that thing, like I said at the time in the review, is that what makes you wonder what would have happened had someone reached out to him and stopped him going down this particular path. What had someone reached out to him as a human being, some member of the public or a hero? How could they have stopped him being a murderous dark force in the end, even though he had done something horrendous prior to all of that? And this is going back to that. This is someone finally reaching out to him. Someone finally reaching out to him as a human being. And I like that. It gives the series a more of a thematic wrapping. It gives it more of a thematic bookending. Though with that said, watch me be wrong, and it just ended some big gratuitous fist fight with everyone going a level beyond. But hey, I do like the way this is all folding out, at least in here and now, because it goes back into the idea of desperation. Our heroes are doing their absolute best to try and keep this going, or at least our hero, given that at this moment it's only really Midoriya and Tomura fighting, and now they're having to do something so desperate as to give the bad guys the power, because some of those powers will weaken him, at least for a little bit. And it is such a desperate gamble that I do like that. It shows just how grave things are getting for our heroes, and I like that. I like the way that he's all going, so we'll see where it ends up going. With that said, let us get into the negatives, and just briefly, because this is not an issue with the episode itself, but still an issue nonetheless. Whoever in Crunchyroll decided that they should have AI-generated subtitles for this series really needs their lumps feeling. I mean, good lord. I don't get it. Like, this is a series that has been in production now for, what, a year? They'll have scripts. They'll have something they can translate. Just use those. Use those scripts and use those for the subtitles. You don't need an AI-generated thing to translate this for you, because it doesn't fecking work. There are moments in when I was watching this episode where the subtitles did not appear at all, because I guess the algorithm thing just thought that the words that people were saying were just guttural noises, were stuff that could not or would not or should not be translated. So at the start of the episode, for example, you got the bit where you're seeing all the destruction, and you got the old man going, oh, he's probably saying something along the lines of, oh no, so much death, so much destruction, oh no! But that's not what he's saying. That's not what's getting translated. There's nothing there. You're seeing this old man giving this tearful, oh no, everything's going to hell, oh no! But all I'm getting is just him going, in Japanese, because he didn't translate it. And later in the episode, when we got to Star and Strike making a big reappearance thing, you know the moment where she's like pointing to like where the wound thing is, or what it is that they're going to try and interact with? That doesn't get translated at all. We get a little bit translated for her. Nothing in the middle where the big important stuff is happening, where she's explaining stuff. And then maybe a little bit towards the end of it. But here's the deal. If I was watching in German, it would have done. Because I would have thought that, oh, this is the AI thing dropping a bollock or something. It must be doing some kind of live translation thing. So I'd briefly switch over to the German ones and jump it back. And the only reason I have any idea what she was saying in that particular moment is because I know a little bit of German. That's it! It's absolute nonsense. This has been in production for months. Hell, with the original manga series involved, you've got these scripts for years at this point. You shouldn't be using AI for something that you could have got done in an afternoon, for God's sake. With that said, to actually talk about the substance of the episode itself, I enjoyed this episode, but it does feel like it is more of a connecting tissue episode, more than it is an absolute driving force episode. It's not filler, but it is clear that this is an episode of, right, we've just seen the big bad villain of this series, or at least the one that was supposed to be the big bad villain originally, to some degree or another, getting blown up by Bakugo, who has just come back after everyone thinking he was dead, right? So, we have all the emotional stuff that people need to catch their breath. This is the episode to catch people's breath back with. And it's an episode with a lot of exposition. In exposition, it's delivered decently well, but it's exposition nonetheless. I do have a lot of respect, and I do like this episode, but it does feel like a bit of a gear shift from what we've had previously, and certainly is going to be a gear shift from what we're going to get next, because it looks like next week things are really going to kick off into bigger, spectacular things. Even though there still might be a bit of a gear shifting going through all of that, we're still getting into like the meats of the final battle itself even more so. So it's just a simple fact of it feels as though there maybe should have been something else here. Maybe they could have had a little bit more action in the first half of it. I don't know, but still, decent episode. And with that said, let's get into the overview. I think this is a strong episode. I do think, like I say, as far as the negatives are concerned, it does feel as though it is like the point between two greater things. Everything we've had with Bakugo over the past couple of weeks, and everything we had towards the start of this with All Might. Brilliant, fantastic, good, and I have no doubt that what comes in the next few weeks is going to create spectacular good. It's just that here we are in the bit between it, and what is good, it doesn't feel like it could be as good as it should be, but nonetheless, a solid episode nonetheless. Well, that's said and done, however, let's get into Comment Corner! It's time for Comment Corner. You know, I just want to point out that the reason why this episode might be an hour later or something for some people is because the clocks went back last weekend, or the weekend before, or something along those lines, so I'm watching this week's episode at what is the usual time for me, but it's like an hour later for everyone else because of the clocks going back or something, or earlier, I don't know. It's all a lot of bullshit trying to keep hold of, but nonetheless, we'll look at something more interesting, a lot more fun. Let us talk about the comments from the previous video. We have a comment from Big X1 who says, if I'm honest, I think the end of All for One was a bit too short for me. He is the villain of this world, and his final fight this season is kind of short. Thank you for your comment, and I will admit that and this is something that is picked up in the comments further into it, that when you think about it, the fight against All for One is something that's really been going on a lot longer, because it's stuff that was done during last year's season as well. But I do agree with the fact at the very least for this season, it does feel as though it was ultimately 4-ish episodes of fighting with him, when it could easily be 5 or 6, but that's the way they ultimately put it together. I think it's still good, still great. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more, but I think that's just how this series itself is constructed. Our next comment comes from Scott TV Gamer, who says, All for One was exactly evil right away. Quirks do seem to have an effect on people's personalities, and even back in the womb, when stealing all the nutrients, he had a desire to take things for himself. If anyone actually helped his mother, he was born into a world where he didn't have to take things for himself in order to survive, he might have experienced the joys of giving to those less fortunate as well. Yoichi says, even says that All for One could have been the kindest quirk, One for All could have been the kindest quirk of all. And one detail I do love, and that I've seen a few bring up, is how Yoichi's transferred to One for All, to Kudo. It must have been subconsciously, since no one knew about his ability to transfer quirks. It's believed that to have it happen when his blood splashing Kaido's face. Sorry, I'm desperate with reading. But it seems also on All for One's face, it's just another case of Yoichi rejecting his brother and choosing to sign with a random stranger he just met. Manga confirms he was actually on the run for 2 months by this time. Thank you for your comment. Sorry for getting a bit back to front, but as I've mentioned in the past, I have problems reading with it. It is good to get a little bit of insight and explanation as to how some of this stuff was put together. The thing about All for One not being evil from the start, not exactly being evil from the start, is, I don't know, I think it's more the presentation of how it's put together more than anything else, because from how it is written, it certainly does feel like a case of he was evil to begin with. Now, it's just a comment I don't usually go into the comments replying to comments, but there's one that I just wanted to pick out because it's got me thinking, is something I might well discuss at a later point, and this is from Icefire Moroki, who says, and this is me talking about, in response to me, the response to the response I gave, they say that it doesn't help when you consider the fact that his mother was an alcoholic, so that probably caused some mental problems for him when he was with his birth. And since he took most of the nutrients, he probably had most of the problems as well. Just not a justification, but something interesting to think about. Now, this comment, as well as just how aware that All For One was of his surroundings, because he was only newly born. Hell, even in the womb, he had an insight and awareness of the world around him that he simply should not have had, which is making me wonder if the transference quirk really is what his quirk was. There's a part of me that wonders whether or not his quirk might have been something else, but it just manifested itself as being a transference thing. I know that literally, and how it is depicted and how it's presented in the series, yes, it was a transference quirk, but there's an element of it that can't help me feel as though maybe it wasn't really a transference thing, maybe it was some kind of hyper-awareness quirk. Like he had some kind of level of hyper-awareness, he was able to sense and feel things beyond his natural limitations, and because he had such a grasp on how things work around him, that gave him the ability to then transfer quirks. Like, the transference thing wasn't the heart of it, it was just something that came as a result of that. He knew how quirks work so well, and how the world works so well around him, that he was able to transfer that into him. And it would in some way play into the fact that he has no pupils, because he's hyper aware of everything around him, but not to people themselves, which then plays into the thing about the reason why he ultimately loses, because he sees the people around him as being pawns and not people. I will admit I am just spitballing this here, and it's something that I might well sit down and meditate on greater, but nonetheless, thank you all for the comments, thank you all for the subscriptions, thank you for all the likes, and if you'd like me to know what you thought about this one down in the comment section down below, you will be read out in a future video. Thank you all for listening, thank you all for watching, and see you next time. Goodbye!
Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, click the bell, and do all the YouTubey stuff that YouTube wants you to do. Go on, it'll do me a power of good. Until next time, my friends, goodbye!